Ice Cube, the voice that helped shape American culture, the spirit behind Straight Outta Compton, and the unforgettable soul of Friday, is more than just an icon. He is a man who rose from one of the toughest neighborhoods in America and carved his name into music, film, and history with iron will, honesty, and a fire that never goes out. His journey has inspired generations, a life built from loss, resilience, and an unshakable will. But every victory came at the price of pain beyond imagination, the kind of pain powerful enough to break any life. And now, at 56, the question remains, what storm is still tightening its grip around him? Before we begin, don't forget to hit like as a tribute to his extraordinary talent and unbreakable spirit. The first cracks of his life tore open like rising canyons, ripping the sky apart before anyone even knew his name. Ice Cube was born on June 15, 1969, in Westmont, a corner of south-central Los Angeles where daylight felt thin, where streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks, and where families learned to live with an uneasy silence that never truly left their walls. His father, Hosea Jackson, returned home each evening with the weary steps of a man who worked the grounds of UCLA under the sun, carrying both pride and a quiet burden. His mother, Doris, who spent long shifts at a hospital, guarded her children with a stern love shaped by fear of the world outside. Money was never abundant, yet they stretched every dollar with discipline, offering stability even when the neighborhood around them trembled with uncertainty. At their small dinner table, conversations were sparse, replaced by the soft clink of silverware and the steady ticking of an old clock, while outside, the distant echo of emergency sirens drifted through the night, like reminders that danger lived just beyond their door. Ice Cube shared this fragile world with his older brother Clyde and a family lineage rich in creativity, tied to artists like Delta Funky Homo Sapien and Cam. But even that spark of artistry could not shield a young boy from the weight settling quietly onto his childhood. The wound that defined him came when he was only 12, a moment that pushed childhood out of his house and left a silence no one knew how to fill. A tragic event took his sister Beverly's life. She was in her late teens, so suddenly and so unfairly that it felt as if the world had been stripped of its balance. He remembered his mother's knees giving way as the news broke, her hands covering her face as though she could shield herself from a reality too cruel to accept, while his father stared at the floor in a hollow stillness, searching for something solid in a world that had just fallen apart beneath him. On the day of the funeral, Ice Cube stood on the sidewalk, with his hands in his pockets, watching the car pull away with a quiet that didn't belong to a 12-year-old, feeling something inside him drop into a place he would never fully reach again. Years later, he would admit softly that losing Beverly changed the way he looked at every sunrise, teaching him how fragile a single moment could be and how quickly a life could be taken from someone who had done nothing more than stand in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the weeks that followed, their home grew colder, as if grief itself had taken a chair at the table, and even the smallest hint of laughter seemed unable to find its way back through the door. His mother spent long hours staring out the window at nothing in particular. His father spoke less with each passing day, and Ice Cube moved through the house with the cautious steps of someone afraid to disturb a memory he wasn't ready to touch. He grew older in ways he could not yet name, walking through South Central with the solemn awareness of a boy who had learned too soon that the world made no promises. The neighborhood's cracked streets, the warm asphalt of summer days, and the chill of Los Angeles nights became part of him, reminders that safety was borrowed, not owned. At school, he often felt like an outsider carrying an invisible weight, And even simple laughter from classmates felt distant, as if it belonged to a world he was no longer part of. He later reflected that Beverly's absence left an emptiness that shaped every choice he made, a quiet ache that returned in unexpected moments and reminded him of all the words he never had the chance to say. What remained was a determination, thin at first, then fierce, to find a place where pain could be lifted, even for a breath. But nothing he tried could quiet the noise inside his chest. Nothing except the one thing he had not yet discovered: writing. Around 14, almost by accident, he found the outlet that would save him. A friend challenged him to type out some lines, and what emerged surprised even him. Words that felt heavier, truer, sharper than he expected, as if they had been waiting behind his ribs for years, unable to breathe. He began writing late into the night, hunched over a small desk beneath a dim bulb, shaping lines that carried both the sorrow of his home and the rhythm of the streets outside. Each verse felt like a release, a wound reopening so it could finally heal. And he would later say that no teacher, no mentor, no classroom had ever taught him how to write. Only the ache he carried did. Writing was no hobby. It was survival. The only place where fear softened and memory found form. The only space where a young boy from South Central could speak without trembling. And from that quiet corner, from those nights lit by nothing but pain and determination, a voice began to rise. One the world would one day recognize as Ice Cube. And as the quiet left by loss settled deeper into his life, the world pulled him forward with a force he didn't feel ready for, demanding a strength shaped by pain he never chose. Each morning, he boarded a bus from South Central to Woodland Hills, resting his head against the cold window as the city blurred past. A thin strip of asphalt carrying him between two worlds that never met. Taft High School felt unreal. Polished floors, easy laughter, faces that glanced his way with curiosity or caution. He walked those halls carrying a grief stitched so tightly inside him that no one could see the weight he dragged from class to class. Some days, the pressure of living between a house full of memories and a school that kept him at arm's length felt almost unbearable. Yet he kept going, guided by a silent promise he made the day he lost Beverly, that he would move forward, even when he didn't know how. By 1987, he tried to choose stability, enrolling at the Phoenix Institute of Technology to study architectural drafting. He excelled, sharp focus, disciplined hands, but even the clean geometry of blueprints couldn't quiet the fractures beneath his ribs. He later admitted that in those lines and angles, he realized no house he designed could rebuild the pieces of his own life. After a year, he stepped away from that safe path and returned to Los Angeles with nothing but determination and the ache of someone who had grown up too fast. It wasn't rebellion, it was truth, the kind that rises when silence becomes unbearable. He needed a place where everything he couldn't say aloud could breathe, where shadows weren't weaknesses, but stories waiting for a voice. Music, raw and unfiltered, gave him that space. Around this time, he poured himself into writing. Not for ambition, but survival. With his cousin, Sir Jinx, he formed CIA, performing at backyard parties where Dr. Dre kept the night alive behind turntables. Those gatherings were loud and electric, everything his quiet home was not. And somewhere in that pulse, something inside him finally unlocked. Dre felt it too, not just the rhythm in Cube's delivery, but the weight and precision of every line. At 16, Ice Cube sold Boyz n the Hood to Eazy-E, and though fame was still far away, the air around him shifted. For the first time, Someone beyond his neighborhood looked at him and saw not a kid from South Central, but a voice worth hearing, a truth worth carrying. Still, the climb ahead was anything but gentle. Rap was dismissed by many, judged before a verse was heard, and Ice Cube came from a place too often labeled, overlooked, or feared. Some wrote him off before he opened his mouth, assuming someone from his streets had nothing meaningful to say. But he had already endured a loss that rewired his world, and after that, rejection felt small. He wrote deep into the night, letting South Central guide him. The hum of streetlights, the distant sirens, the weight of memory. With each verse, he built something sturdier than any blueprint he once studied. A foundation of truth, resilience, and an unshakable belief that his voice would not be denied. And from that foundation, his rise didn't just begin, it became inevitable. Success didn't arrive gently. It crashed into his life like a storm he wasn't prepared to weather. Loud, blinding, and demanding a strength built from every scar he carried. Long before the world knew his name, that storm began quietly, in late-night backyard parties lit only by porch bulbs and the low thump of borrowed speakers. That was where Dr. Dre first heard him. Not just a teenager testing out rhymes, but a voice that cut through the noise with an honesty too sharp to ignore. Cube later said he remembered the way Dre looked at him that night, like he heard something he'd been waiting on. At 16, he wrote "Boyz in the Hood," selling it to Eazy-E in a moment that shifted the air around him. It wasn't fame, not yet, but it was the first time the world reached back when he spoke. The first crack of light in a life shaped by shadows. And that flicker, in the right hands, was enough to become a blaze. When Ice Cube stepped into N.W.A., he wasn't just another young rapper. He was the sharpest pen in the room, the voice of neighborhoods America preferred to ignore. Straight Outta Compton exploded in 1988, forcing the nation to face realities it had long silenced. His lyrics didn't entertain, they confronted. But while the world echoed his words, the paperwork behind the scenes told a crueler truth. Contracts that hid what he deserved, promises packaged as praise, and a paycheck of only $32,000 for an album selling in the millions. The fire he gave N.W.A. was being smothered by signatures that didn't carry his name. Walking away in 1989 felt like stepping into darkness without a map, yet he chose dignity over comfort, fully aware that the price for honesty was loneliness. The early 90s proved why he had been the backbone all along. Amerique Kiki's Most Wanted in 1990 hit like a national siren, followed by Death Certificate in 1991, fearless, unfiltered, and too honest for some to swallow. Then came The Predator in 1992, selling over 2 million copies and becoming the only album that year to top both the pop and R&B charts. At just 23, he was shaping the country's conversation. But greatness is heavy. He worked 16-hour days, slept on tour buses, lost his voice between shows, and carried expectations capable of breaking seasoned stars. And as new sounds rose, G-Funk, East Coast waves, then the next generation, his earthquakes became tremors. Few pains cut deeper than watching a new era walk through the same door you once shattered, without knowing who cracked it open first. Years later, he would admit that this shift taught him a hard truth. Being a pioneer means learning to stand tall, even when the spotlight moves on. Hollywood offered a new battleground, not a sanctuary. In 1991, John Singleton saw something raw in his eyes, something that couldn't be trained. Boyz and the Hood turned him into an actor the industry could no longer dismiss. But acceptance wasn't waiting with open arms. He entered casting rooms where people saw a rapper before they saw a performer. He learned scripts until dawn, rewrote scenes to make them real, and studied the camera the way he once studied pain. Friday in 1995 changed everything, a film he wrote and starred in, flipping a $3.5 million budget into $28 million and launching a cultural legacy. Through Cube Vision, he produced hits like Barbershop, $75 million, Are We There Yet, nearly $100 million, and 21 Jump Street. But the higher he climbed, the more suffocating the air became. Meetings stretching past midnight, budgets so large they felt like holding dynamite. The fear that one flop could erase years of hard-earned trust. Success didn't make the weight lighter. It made the stakes higher. Then came Big 3 in 2017, his boldest leap and heaviest burden. Turning a rapper into the owner of a professional sports league sounded naive to critics, risky to investors, and impossible to everyone else. Yet he built it anyway. Arenas, athletes, contracts, lawsuits, partners, every decision came with zeros that could shake a man's confidence. The league burned through millions before making a dollar. And there were nights he stared at the numbers knowing failure here wouldn't just cost money. It would cost legacy. But he kept pushing. The same way he pushed through those long bus rides from South Central, through studio nights running past sunrise, through every door that tried to close on him. And in the end, one truth rose above everything he created. Ice Cube didn't climb from nothing to a net worth of over $150 million because the world made space for him. He climbed because he refused to stop carving space out of stone, turning pain into power, power into work, and work into a legacy that will outlive him. Time has a way of testing even the strongest spirits, and in the past few years, Ice Cube learned that some storms don't roar, they whisper. In 2021, he quietly stepped away from the film Oh Hell No, turning down a role reportedly worth $9 million because he refused to take the vaccine the studio required. He didn't protest. He didn't argue. He didn't try to change anyone's mind. He simply said no and accepted everything that decision would cost him. In Hollywood, $9 million isn't just a paycheck. It's momentum. It's protection. It's the kind of stability even legends fight to hold on to. And yet, he walked away, knowing decisions made in silence often echo the longest. Later, behind closed doors, he admitted the loss stung in a place deeper than money, in that quiet space where principle and consequence collide, and neither side walks away clean. But the sting didn't end with the paycheck he never cashed. What followed was the kind of shift no camera ever captures. The subtle but unmistakable feeling that Hollywood, the place he had poured 3 decades of sweat, discipline, and reinvention into, was drifting forward without him. Not punishing him, not shutting him out, just moving on. And sometimes, that is the crueler wound. He watched younger names fill the spaces he once occupied, watched new rules settle into the industry like dust, watched opportunities appear in rooms where his name was no longer the first anyone mentioned. He once joked, though with a heaviness he didn't bother hiding, Hollywood changes like weather. If you don't keep your coat close, you'll wake up in a season you didn't expect. For him, winter arrived early, cold, quiet, and without warning. And for a man who built doors where none existed, realizing the world no longer checked to see if he was standing on the other side was a pain sharper than any headline. Still, even in that long season, he carried himself with the same resolve forged in South Central long before the world paid attention. There were days when the phone stayed still, when a script he believed in went to someone else, when a meeting ended with polite smiles and unspoken doubts. Days when the whisper, "Your time has passed," felt louder than applause ever did. But Ice Cube had met that whisper before. He heard it at 19 when he left N.W.A. with nothing but truth in his hands. He heard it when critics dismissed his early solo work. He heard it again when he stepped into acting, when he launched Big 3, when every bold move he made was called a mistake. Until it wasn't. And though age adds weight to every disappointment, though being told you may not be needed anymore at 56 cuts differently, he faced it the same way he faced every storm before, with the quiet endurance of a man who refuses to shrink. Some wounds don't bleed. They sit heavy in the chest, turning every night into a conversation with yourself about what chapters are ending and which ones you're brave enough to begin. But if there is one truth that time has never been able to take from him, it is this: Ice Cube has never measured his worth by the doors others opened, only by the ones he built when they didn't. Losing a $9 million role didn't break him. Hollywood shifting didn't silence him. It clarified him. Today, he stands not defeated, but defined, moving with the calm certainty of someone who has survived enough storms to stop fearing the clouds. He continues touring, creating, leading Big 3, and speaking with the grounded confidence of a man who has already earned his place in the story of American culture. And if the world has grown louder with opinions, he has grown quieter with purpose. Because in the end, his journey was never about chasing the spotlight. It was about having the strength to stand steady when the spotlight turns away. And that strength, more than fame, money, or roles, is the legacy he knows time cannot erase. His career bruised him, tested him, reshaped him. But his family was the grace that steadied every storm. Long before the world knew his name, Ice Cube met the woman who would outlast every spotlight he ever stood under. Kimberly Woodruff didn't fall for him at first sight, not yet, but something in the quiet confidence of her walk made him pause in a way he wasn't used to. She moved through the world with a grace that made noise fall away, and he found himself looking for her in crowded hallways long before she ever looked back. Months later, when life softened the edges around them both, she finally saw him the way he had always seen her. By the time they married in 1992, he was standing at the edge of fame, but they were still two young souls counting grocery money under yellow kitchen lights, sharing late dinners on a sagging couch that squeaked every time they shifted their weight. Their refrigerator hummed through the night, the cracked plates clinked softly during homemade meals, and the thin walls of their first apartment carried every hope spoken in a whisper. Nothing in those early days was glamorous, but everything was honest. And without realizing it, they were laying the quiet, sturdy groundwork that would one day carry the weight of an extraordinary life. But every foundation, no matter how steadfast, is eventually tested. Hollywood gives bright lights, but demands shadows in return, and as Ice Cube's star climbed higher, the cost at home began to deepen. Kimberly ate dinners alone under a flickering kitchen lamp, her fork scraping gently against a plate that never had a second hand reaching for it. She tucked 5 children into bed, on nights when his schedule blurred into airports and cold hotel rooms, whispering reassurances that she herself barely believed. He missed birthdays, school plays, first steps, moments he pieced together through grainy photographs and rushed calls between takes. And then came the night that carved itself into their marriage, their son's birthday. The candles burned low, wax puddling on the tablecloth. The cake leaned slightly, as if even it were waiting. Kimberly checked the door again and again. A small lift of the chin, a held breath, each time returning to a stillness that felt heavier than disappointment. When their son finally asked, "Is Dad coming?" she knelt down, brushed his hair back, and murmured, "He's trying." But Ice Cube didn't make it home. Hours later, he stood in the hallway, keys still in hand, listening to the silence pressing against the walls. Through a cracked open door, he saw Kimberly at the table, head bowed, balloons drooping behind her like exhausted dreams. On the couch, their son slept with the wrapped gift meant for his father still clutched in his small hands. And in that still, breathless moment, Cube felt something inside him fracture, a realization as sharp as broken glass. He had gained the world, but was losing the time that mattered most. What saved them wasn't apology or grand gestures. It was the quiet bravery of staying, even when staying hurt. Ice Cube began coming home differently, slower, present in ways he hadn't been before. He would sit on the edge of the bed long after midnight, listening to the soft sounds of his family sleeping and wondering how many nights he had already missed. Kimberly noticed the shift, the way he stood in doorways, as if relearning the outline of their home, the way his shoulders dropped when he held the children a beat longer than usual. And she softened. Instead of pulling away, she leaned in. Their 5 children, O'Shea Jr., Daryl, Karima, Deja, and Sharif, unknowingly stitched their parents back together with every need, every laugh, every hand reaching for both of them at once. And in 2015, when O'Shea Jr. portrayed his father in Straight Outta Compton, reliving the trauma and triumph of Cube's youth, the family sat together in a dark theater. As the film flickered across the screen, Cube watched his own life reflected through his son's eyes. Every loss, every bruise, every victory. And something inside him healed with a softness he hadn't expected. In that glow, he wasn't the icon the world praised. He was simply a husband, a father, and later, a grandfather. Roles that grounded him in a way fame never could. Today, their home is imperfect in all the ways real homes are. Arguments that spark and settle, misunderstandings that sting and then soften into forgiveness. But it is steady, warm, lived in, and earned one hard day at a time. Ice Cube often says, success didn't teach him how to love, family did. And Kimberly, the woman who once walked past him without a second glance, became the compass quietly guiding him through every high and every heartbreak. In a world where Hollywood marriages burn out faster than opening weekend numbers, theirs glows like a light that refuses to dim, steady even when winds change. For every parent fighting to hold their family together, for every couple weathering their own silent storms, their journey offers a truth worth carrying. Love is not forged in perfect years, but in imperfect days survived side by side. And sometimes, the greatest victories in a man's life don't come under spotlights or applause. They happen quietly, at the kitchen table, with the people who never stopped waiting for him to come home. The world remembers the day Eazy-E left us, the headlines flashing across television screens, the stunned silence that settled over Los Angeles, the disbelief that rolled through neighborhoods that had grown up on his voice. He was only 31, far too young to go, far too iconic to lose. For millions, it felt like the end of an era in hip-hop. But for Ice Cube, it was something far more intimate and far more devastating. The loss of a brother he never got to forgive. They had once stood shoulder to shoulder in cramped studios with flickering bulbs and buzzing speakers, 2 boys from the margins trying to turn raw sound into a legacy. Fame would lift them, money would divide them, Pride would silence them. And then life, in its quietest, cruelest moment, would close a door neither of them knew was about to lock forever. Long before the world called them pioneers, they were just kids with notebooks, cheap microphones, and the kind of hunger that comes from growing up with nothing but potential to cling to. Ice Cube still remembered the dusty smell of that first studio, the second-hand equipment, the mismatched chairs, the way the carpet curled at the edges. He remembered Eazy-E leaning back in his seat, listening to a beat with that small, knowing nod he had, the one that said, "There's something here. Keep going." It was Eazy who believed in him when his name held no weight. Eazy who bought Boyz in the Hood when Cube was just 16, handing him a shot that would change both of their lives. And in those early years, it felt like destiny was theirs alone to command. N.W.A. became lightning in a bottle, explosive, fearless, unforgettable. The kind of moment in music history that crackles even decades later. But lightning burns as fast as it shines. Contracts twisted intentions. Miscommunication grew teeth. Loyalty turned into tension. Cube walked away in 1989 carrying anger he didn't know how to release, and regret he didn't know how to name. Eazy stayed, convinced he too had been betrayed. And so they drifted. Two men who once shared everything, now separated by a silence too heavy for either of them to break. Then came the call in early 1995, the one that stopped Ice Cube cold. Eazy-E was in the hospital. It was serious. Far more serious than fans were being told. Complications from an AIDS diagnosis had led to a sudden, severe pneumonia, the kind of life-threatening illness that offered almost no time to react. Cube felt the past 8 years slam into him all at once. Every argument, every lyric aimed like a blade, every moment he thought he could fix later. He didn't go to the press, didn't rehearse a tribute. He sat alone for hours, replaying memories he wished he could rewrite. When Cube finally walked through the hospital doors, everything felt wrong. The sterile brightness, the quiet corridors, the distant beeping of machines. Visitors whispered. Nurses moved with urgency. And somewhere behind a closed door, the boy he once recorded with until sunrise was slipping away. Cube approached the room, hand brushing the cold metal handle, and froze. He couldn't go in. He stared at the floor tiles because looking up meant facing a truth he wasn't ready to accept. Later, he confessed softly, "I didn't know what I would have said." But time has no patience for regret. On March 26, 1995, Eazy-E was gone. Sudden, sharp, final. And with him went the last fragile chance to repair what had fractured between them. Los Angeles mourned loudly, but Ice Cube mourned in silence. At the funeral, surrounded by cameras, fans, and the heavy echo of a legend taken too soon, he stood with a weight no headline could capture. He didn't cry publicly. He rarely ever had. But those close to him said the regret settled into his chest like something that would never completely loosen. Because some wounds close, and some simply teach. In the years that followed, Cube spoke of Eazy-E with a tenderness that revealed the truth beneath every past tension. Not as a rival, not as a business partner, but as the friend who gave him his first real shot. "We were just kids," he said once. "Kids trying to make something out of nothing." And maybe that's why the loss cut so deeply. Not because they had been great together, but because they had been young together. Hopeful, reckless, brilliant, flawed, believing life would always give them one more chance to set things right. Today, when Ice Cube looks back at the stages he's ruled, the films he's created, the empire he's built, there is always a quiet shadow standing beside him. The memory of a boy with a high-pitched laugh, dark glasses, and a grin that once believed they had forever. And in that shadow lives the lesson Ice Cube carries still. Make peace while the door is open. Because some doors close without warning, and some goodbyes never wait for words. Now, at age 56, Ice Cube stands as a living testament to how far determination, discipline, and unshakable belief can carry a man. His net worth today is estimated at around $160 million, a figure so staggering it almost feels unreal when you remember the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights of South Central where he began. Yet every dollar in that number carries the weight of long nights in studio basements, early mornings on film sets, business negotiations that stretched into dawn, and a lifetime of choosing ownership over comfort. His real estate portfolio alone reads like a catalog of the American dream at its most triumphant. His Marina del Rey mansion, sitting along the shimmering Grand Canal, spans multiple levels of floor-to-ceiling glass, floating staircases, a rooftop deck with fire pits and ocean breezes, a private indoor theater, a chef's kitchen polished in marble, and balconies overlooking water so still it looks painted at sunrise. It's a home that whispers luxury in every detail, from the heated floors to the panoramic views that turn every evening into a postcard. Then there's his 8,000-square-foot estate in Encino, a property he has held for decades. With 7 bedrooms, double master suites, a recording room tucked near the back wing, a full gym, manicured lawns, a private basketball court, resort-style pool and spa, and living spaces large enough to host entire family gatherings without ever feeling crowded. The home is surrounded by tall hedges that keep photographers out and peace inside, a sanctuary earned through years of fighting to rise above the noise of the world. And if real estate weren't enough to illustrate his climb, his garage tells the rest of the story. A luxury car collection nearing $700,000 in value, featuring a pristine '64 Chevy Impala lowrider, a Rolls-Royce Ghost with bespoke detailing, a Porsche Panamera built for speed and elegance, a Cadillac Escalade for family trips, and several custom rides highlighting the West Coast style he helped define. Each vehicle is more than metal. It's a mile marker of how far he has traveled. For a man who started with nothing but notebooks and determination, these homes and machines are not symbols of excess. They are reminders of survival, reinvention, and generational strength. But Ice Cube's empire is not built on luxury alone. It's built on vision. Music gave him his opening. Film expanded his reach. Producing strengthened his influence. And entrepreneurship fortified his future. When he co-founded the Big Three Basketball League in 2017, critics doubted him, unsure whether a rapper could build a professional sports franchise from the ground up. Yet step by step, through negotiations with investors, partnerships with arenas, contracts with retired NBA legends, and endless behind-the-scenes decision-making, Cube built something real, something respected, something profitable. He understood early on that applause fades, trends shift, and fame evaporates with time, but ownership lasts, investments last, vision lasts, and the life he lives today, from oceanside glass walls to sprawling estates and a garage that glitters like a showroom, stands as proof that dreams built from nothing can grow into legacies built to last. At home, Ice Cube's life is quieter now, fuller, steadier, and shaped by the family he built over 3 decades. He and Kimberly still share the same partnership they committed to back in 1992, but today, their world looks different. Calmer, more grounded, and surrounded by the voices of grown children who now carry dreams of their own. Their eldest, O'Shea Jackson Jr., is a successful actor with a rising career, often dropping by for late dinners or bringing his own child along, turning Ice Cube into a grandfather with a softness few fans ever get to see. Daryl works in music and production, building his path behind the scenes. Karima and Deja stay mostly private, choosing lives away from the spotlight, while Sharif, the youngest, moves between creative pursuits and family gatherings with the easy confidence of someone raised in a home built on both structure and love. These days, the Ice Cube household isn't defined by chaos or deadlines. It's defined by routine. Mornings begin with light spilling through wide windows, Kimberly reading in the kitchen, while Cube reviews schedules or quietly checks on Big 3 updates. Some days, the house fills with all 5 children, laughing loudly around the long dining table. Other days, it's just the 2 of them walking across their property at sunset, talking about their kids, their grandchild, and the simple joy of reaching an age where family means more than any premiere ever could. Holidays are bigger now, louder, but warmer too. Grandbaby toys in the living room, cousins catching up, Kimberly cooking dishes everyone waits for all year, and Cube moving through the house with the slow, content rhythm of a man who has finally learned to enjoy the life he built. He still works, tours, produces, leads Big 3, but when he comes home, he leaves the public world at the door. Here, he is not a rapper, not a mogul, not an icon. Here, he is a husband, whose favorite place is still the sofa beside his wife. A father who gives advice over backyard barbecues. A grandfather who bends down slowly, but smiles wider than he did in his youth. And in this stage of life, that role, the steady, present anchor of 3 generations, has become the one he cherishes most. Philanthropy is woven softly into his work. He rarely advertises his efforts, but those close to him know he has invested in programs designed to widen access to opportunities for young creators and underserved communities. He believes in giving others the chance he once needed, not in the form of charity, but in the form of access, mentorship, funding, and possibility. His message is simple: help others build doors, because not everyone is born in a place where doors exist. That belief runs through everything he touches, from his business decisions to his quiet acts of generosity. Even now, with decades of success behind him and comfort all around him, Ice Cube moves through the world with the steady confidence of a man who's earned every inch of his peace. He's still on the road, still building projects, still showing up at Lakers and Dodgers games with the same quiet fire that's carried him since the first day he picked up a pen. Big 3 continues to grow under his watch. And when he steps onto a stage, whether in a packed arena or an intimate venue, the crowd feels the unmistakable charge of someone who remembers what it was like to fight for a single microphone. Time has touched him, yes, but instead of softening him, it has refined him. There's a calmness in his eyes now, a clarity in the way he speaks, as if he finally understands that the world can change around him as much as it wants. The man at the center remains unshaken. So as we close this chapter of Ice Cube's life, perhaps what stays with us isn't a lesson, but a feeling. The quiet recognition that every life, no matter how public or private, carries its own storms and its own victories. Maybe it's the perseverance. Maybe it's the humanity. Maybe it's the way he continues to rise, even after the world shifts beneath his feet. And if something in his journey lingered with you, a moment, a memory, a glimpse of who he is now, We invite you to share it with us in the comments below. If tonight's story moved you, even in the smallest way, feel free to tap the like button and stay connected with our community. And from all of us here at Golden American Stars, we wish you a home filled with peace, a heart steady with health, days touched by happiness, and a life so abundant that each sunrise feels like a gift. May you walk forward, protected, strengthened, and surrounded by everything your spirit has quietly been hoping for.